Welcome back to Fast Market on the Schwab Network. It's time for our cash tag segment. Now let's bring in the co-founder of LikeFolio.com, Mr. Landon Swan, to the show. He's going to talk about, well, just about every stock that we're talking about on the show today, Landon. But let's start with Uber, as it has earnings tomorrow morning, and you've got some data on Uber. This stock's had a good run this year, Landon, and it's had a good run the last 10 days. What does LikeFolio's data say on Uber?
Yeah, and you know what? Uber's doing really well in the market compared to Lyft, especially. I mean, the stock is doing very well. They've got a couple of upgrades recently, and just in general, things are looking pretty strong. The mentions are up about 22% on a year-over-year basis. Compare that to Lyft at 7%. Their happiness is at 56%. Compare that to Lyft at 50%. And even their web traffic is doing better. And I think a lot of this has to do with the fact that they offer food and item delivery in addition to people delivery or ride sharing. So I think that Uber kind of encompasses it all. And they're obviously the dominant leader when it comes to ride sharing. Lyft has made some strides. They've got some aggressive pricing that has done well. But I think that just kind of shows you that the market's a little bit more fickle. I mean, people are going to, generally speaking, take the one that is cheaper, but it's going to be tough to break the habit of always opening Uber every time first. And if it's reasonable, you just hit it. Maybe you don't take the time to compare the prices. So I think the Uber's got the dominant position right now. We've even got some data showing that they're taking a little bit of market share away from DoorDash, the delivery leader by far when it comes to food. DoorDash lost about 3 points as far as the consumer mind share, going from 84% down to 81%. It looks like Uber Eats and Grubhub are kind of splitting that. You can see here, though, the mentions chart, that sort of darker blue line is number of people talking about Uber, where the other blue line is the stock price. And it's, stock is doing very well, especially on the back of those upgrades recently. Again, up about 22% on a year-over-year basis. I don't love the upgrades from a investor standpoint, right? I mean, from a trader standpoint, because, I would like to lean bullish on this name, but the stock price movement has kind of pushed us back into neutral territory because, they kind of took away some of the edge there. I think if you're talking about the stock at $41 or $42, then yeah, you could get me to lean pretty bullish going into this report. But now where it's at, I think it's a little bit more difficult. So we're a little bit more on the sidelines on this one. But long term, I think it's clear that Uber's beating Lyft. They've got them, pretty much in every category. We're talking about mentions, happiness, web visits, and then, of course, as I mentioned, Uber's doing really well when it comes to growing Uber Eats against the dominant player, DoorDash. So I love them long term. This report, though, I think a lot of it's priced in.
And they're not really incentivized to deliver that final death blow to Lyft either. It helps to have a competitor you can point to when you're one of the key players, and it's become a very clear, I think, dominant position. That being said, though, if you're Lyft and you're still, kicking and scratching and attempting your best to compete here, you mentioned a couple other names, DoorDash in particular. Both of those names struggling to, not necessarily entirely just compete, but just the competitive advantage that Uber would have being able to do all things instead of just one. Is there partnerships, mergers, something down the line where some of these names that are specialty players in one thing team up to take on the big bad Uber?
I think, if you see the headline, Lyft and DoorDash get together, if you see that, I think that's kind of the eye opener. I really do think that Uber's kind of doing it all right now. And you've got the specialty players. Lyft obviously understands how to deliver people. They're not doing it as well or at the same volume as Uber. DoorDash clearly dominates the food delivery market. So, if you could get those two to sort of team up against Uber, that would be headlines. That would be very, very interesting. Absolutely, Alex.
Landon, let's have the uncomfortable conversation now, and I'll call it the Spotify Uber discussion. Okay, and here, follow me here. I think Spotify has the ability to raise their prices and lower their royalties that they pay out to musicians. I think Uber can't raise prices and they can't decrease paying to their drivers. How does this company get to profitability if they're stuck there? Is it purely a volume question for them to get to profitability?
It's a great question. It's a great point. I think you're right. I mean, every time, I think you should, as the viewers should do this exercise. Every time you get into an Uber, just ask them how long they've been driving for Uber. I do that all the time, and I don't think I've ever heard one that's over 6 months. It's incredible. I mean, now and then you get one, but for the most part, everybody's a few months in, and you never seem to get somebody that says, yeah, I've been doing it for 3 years. So I think people get tired. I think drivers get tired of the low share that they're getting, and I think you're absolutely right. They don't have demand pricing power, and they don't have supply pricing power. They're kind of stuck in the middle. And, we always talk about one day at the end of the rainbow, we're going to have driverless cars, and then Uber's going to dominate. But you know what? At that point, you're going to have a lot of other companies competing as well. Tesla probably being one of them. Everybody's going to get in the game then. So right now, I think you're right. They're stuck. It's a difficult spot to be in because you just can't charge too much more. I've even found myself anecdotally, sometimes when I get out of an airport, I'll just hop in a cab because it's easier, right? It's right there instead of waiting for the Uber and all that. So I think the consumers are kind of getting used to this as a commodity. It's just A to B, get me there. And the novelty is sort of wearing off. So they don't have pricing power on either side. And I think that's a great point, Kevin. It is something that is a long-term concern. Probably the food delivery might be, an avenue for growth. I'm not really sure, but you're absolutely right that the pricing power is a concern for them.
Hey, Landon, that's a pro travel tip to hop in the cab at the airport. They know where they're going. It's quick. We don't want those lines to get too long, though. So we gotta keep that on the. We don't want to tell too many people about that trick. My question to you, though, it's kind of a final thought as we kind of look ahead. I think it's pretty clear how you feel about it, at least short term. Some of this optimism's priced in. The story Uber Lyft is pretty clear. But along those lines of potential driverless cars and AI, couldn't you make the argument that's as much a risk to Uber as it is a potential benefit? As far as I know, they don't got the money to really figure this out. So they're going to be trying to buy this technology more than likely or partner up with someone who does. And at that point, like you said, who's to say they don't just launch their own service or partner up with Lyft?
Exactly. I think you're absolutely right. I mean, every Tesla in the world is waiting with one software update to be a competitor to Uber. As long as you can push that button and, you're not using your car, so you say, all right, go deliver some rides, car. So that, I think you're right. I think it is more of a threat. I think for a long time, myself included, investors would say, Uber one day, once they get to the driverless cars, it's going to be unbelievable because margins go through the roof, and they have got pricing power. Then they're competing. They can go lower on pricing if they want, or they can just have higher margins. But you're right. I think once that AI kind of comes into realm and you've got driverless cars, there's a lot of new companies that are going to jump in, and it's going to be make or break for Uber. I'm not going to say it's the death of Uber, but it is make or break when that happens. I'm not sure how many years out we are, but once it happens, Uber is either going to 20x or they're going to zero probably within 2 years. So it is a gamble once that happens, absolutely.
Two things. Landon, number one, the final question for Uber is, if you go driverless, who owns the car? Don't you have to just buy a bunch of cars then? That's going to cost you money. One last thing, though, Landon. Alex and I covered Celsius Holdings in the first segment. You guys cover them pretty hard here, don't you? Do you have any final thoughts on Celsius before we go?
Sure, absolutely. So I agree on the first question. Yes, you got to have someone who owns the car. And that's why I say if you can have driverless cars owned by consumers and they can sort of log in as a driver, right, and just throw their car out there for use, I think that's the play. But, I think Tesla's got so many, they could probably do that on their own. When it comes to Celsius, yes, this is one that we've been bullish on for quite a long time. And spoiler alert, the bullishness continues. I think we've got a plus 45 score on them right now. Wow. Mentions are up 131% year over year. It's not, parabolic hockey stick type growth, as you can see here from that blue line, but it is all-time highs. People are talking more and more about this company and their brands. We're not showing any signs of weakness, and we do like, it's got a jump over the last, week or so, but with the markets. But overall, we're not at all-time highs on stock price, but we are on social media mentions. So we're still bullish on it, still holding. And this is one that LikeFolio subscribers have made a ton of money on over the years. We've been bullish forever, and we're still bullish right now.
Landon Swan, co-founder of LikeFolio.com. A little extra duty for you today. Take some more money out of petty cash, Landon, and we'll see you. We'll see you tomorrow. Have a good day. All right, Alex. Yeah, Uber is an interesting company because it's had an incredible rally.